Welcome to Tokyo Haneda International Airport, where today we're taking a flight that I've been looking forward to for a long time. ANA's new first class cabin for 13 hours all the way to New York. The journey begins at the ANA Suite Lounge here in Tokyo Haneda, which is still fairly similar to my last visit a few years ago. I started off my time in the lounge by digging into some breakfast, including a few bowls of udon from the noodle bar, and then I took a shower to freshen up before my flight. I spent the next few hours relaxing and watching the planes across the tarmac, looking longingly outside of the windows at a Tokyo skyline that was still closed to entry. The ANA Suite Lounge, well, it's a pretty sweet lounge, but it gets even sweeter on board, so let's go to the gate. The first class cabin on today's flight was actually quite full. ANA New First Class has a total of 8 first class suites, and on today's 13-hour journey over to New York, I found myself in seat 2A, which looked absolutely gorgeous as I first boarded the plane. Wow, this is quite simply an unreal seat, and I'm still soaking it in. Just before takeoff, let's have a look at the amenity kit by Globetrotter, which actually has another amenity kit on the inside by a brand called The Ginza, in which there's a series of luxury skincare items.
Welcome on board ANA Member Star Alliance.
Let's have a look around the ANA New First Class Suite, and what a beautiful suite it is. By far the most impressive feature is definitely the 42-inch entertainment monitor, which stretches all the way from the left edge to the right edge of the screen. Now underneath the screen you've got the sliding tray table as well as an ottoman, and then by the edge here you've got a storage unit that goes fairly deep, and closer to your fingertips you've got the entertainment and seat controls, which are electronically powered, as well as this analog wheel that lets you move your seat back and forth. Down below here you've got a few more storage units which also host the power outlets, and then going back towards the tray table, it actually slides the full length of the suite all the way towards you so that you can eat and work from the comfort of your suite. On the aisle side you've got a literature pocket that actually folds out into a vanity mirror. And then of course the entire suite can be enclosed with these sliding doors to give you maximum privacy. Alright, we've closed the doors here in ANA New First Class, and it's now pretty much an ultra-private first class suite. I gotta say, my first impressions of this product are pretty incredible, and it's gotta be the new best way to fly to and from Japan. I gotta be honest, I'm running on very little sleep right now. It's been a long series of flights that got me here to Tokyo. I think I'm gonna need to get some sleep. There's some really nice loungewear here in ANA. Let's open it up. And there you go. These pajamas are really comfortable, and yeah, I'm gonna need a little bit of a nap before I can really dig into the meal and do it justice. And lastly, there's a further storage compartment over here where you can pull out a clothes hanger and hang your garments for the duration of the flight. As I mentioned, I was pretty tired coming into this flight, and I needed to take a nap before digging into the feast. Thankfully, since we're flying first class, we have dine on demand, and the crew was more than happy to make my bed and allow me to get some rest first before I started eating. I've got my peppermint tea, I've got my bed made right here, and I'll see you in the next few hours, where I promise we're gonna start to feast. By the way guys, if you're curious how I actually booked this ANA first class flight, how I booked this flight without having to pay top dollar for this first class experience, make sure to stick around to the end of the video to find out the exact points that I used and how I managed to book ANA first class for a fraction of the price. By the time I woke up, we were already more than halfway across the Pacific, and that meant we had a problem. Okay, we've woken up with about 6 hours of the flight left to go on a 12-hour flight. And 6 hours out of 12 hours, that's not a lot of time at all to work my way through the entire menu. because we've got the main menu, the snack menu, and then the pre-arrival meal menu, and we gotta dig into all of that. So, no time to waste. Cometh the hour, cometh the meal service here on ANA New First Class, which is of course always one of the highlights of flying a Japanese airline. The first course would be an amuse, which consisted of deep-fried tuna, marinated sea bream, and a foie gras roll, and it got the meal off to a crisp and refreshing start. Of course, even crisper was the Krug champagne that would serve as my drink of choice, and here we were with the first of many glasses. Even though I've flown ANA first class before, number one, I haven't flown in these fancy new seats with the sliding doors, and number two, last time I flew ANA first class, it was an overnight flight with a reduced menu. And here on Japanese airlines, you'll know that the dining experience is what it's all about. I'm super excited to finally dig in to ANA's Japanese dining experience. But of course, to start, I've ordered a very special appetizer from the Western menu instead, to go with my champagne, the caviar. Now, ANA must have known that these caviar and champagne moments are getting a little bit predictable by now, because they served up the caviar in a way that I've never seen before. It's supposedly a red pepper mousse and crab meat gâteau with caviar, and you're supposed to eat it all together. I've never had anything like this before. And thus would begin the multi-course washoku Japanese dinner, starting with the sakizuke, a taste of what's to come, and the zensai, a selection of morsels. Now, first impressions of the sakizuke, it's supposed to be the starter, a taste of things to come. It's very light flavor. I almost feel like it could use a little bit of soy sauce, but I think that's a good thing. You want to start off the meal light and then get into the really tasty stuff. I went for some of the Noguchi Naohiko sake, which is apparently one of Japan's leading sake breweries, and helped myself to a few glasses as the meal proceeded. Next up was the owan, or bold dish, under the if you prefer section of the menu. This was a soup that consisted of bacon wrapped in onion, and it was heavenly and full of umami flavors. Otsukuri was after that, which is another word for sashimi. This dish was simply a plate of seared raw fish, and as somebody who loves sashimi and simply can't get enough of this stuff, I naturally finished every single bite. Now the next few courses would all be served on one tray. Nimono, the simmered plate, kobachi, the tasty tidbits, and shusai, the main course. It's finally time to dig into the main course here on ANA New First Class. We've got the nimono, we've got the kobachi, and we've got the shusai, the main dish, which is a wagyu beef sukiyaki, and I'm super excited to actually taste this for myself. Now I have to say, this was some incredible fine dining at 40,000 feet in the sky. Just look at this raw egg that melts seamlessly into the sukiyaki dish. I pecked away at the various delicacies in front of me, savoring every bite of the meal. And I can confidently say that this was some of the best food I've ever had on a plane. Dessert would then be served in the form of a cherry blossom Mont Blanc, which tasted just as good as it looked. I also helped myself to a cup of coffee and some light treats, alongside the final kanmi dish from the Japanese menu, jelly fruits and bean paste with ice cream. As I finally wrapped up my meal and started to let my food digest a little bit, I couldn't help but play around with the entertainment screen again, simply in awe at how big the screen was. And now it's time to try out one of the most special things about flying ANA first class, the Hibiki 21. That's right, ANA is known for serving the ultra-expensive Hibiki 21 whiskey on their flagship routes in first class. The last time I flew with ANA, this was worth $500 a bottle, but now it's worth upwards of $1,000 a bottle, and you bet I put this bottle to good use. Now, as the sun was rising over the horizon, I needed to think about how to pass the time, besides eating and drinking, of course. And normally, I'm not somebody who watches movies on an airplane, but I thought I'd make an exception here on ANA New First Class just for that 42-inch entertainment screen. Now, in addition to watching movies on the incredible screen, I do also have to give credit to ANA for offering free Wi-Fi to first-class passengers. The connection speed was pretty good, and it allowed me to stay updated on my Instagram stories as the flight progressed, which isn't something I can say for every flight that I take. Here we've got the ANA 777 first class bathroom, which is very brightly illuminated. There's the sink down here, there's a toilet right here, obviously with the Japanese bidet functions. And down here, there's a really useful bench. So if you're changing into your pajamas and stuff, and you're getting out of your shoes, you don't have to step on the floor. You can step right on here as you're changing. The ANA restrooms has a series of amenities, and so I figured I would cleanse my palate before returning to my seat for the next round of food. Two hours of the flight left to go, so it's time to crush the snack menu, starting with this bowl of udon noodles. And don't forget, time was of the essence, because in addition to the snack menu, there was also the second meal service that I had to complete before we landed. And that was served pretty soon after I finished up my trio of snacks, alongside an iced cappuccino to keep me going. Iced cappuccino, along with the washoku set menu, to finish off the feasting festivities here on ANA New First Class. Now somehow, even though I've eaten so much food, I'm not quite bursting just yet, although I probably will be after this set plate right here. But I have to say, ANA First Class, you've really delivered in terms of the gastronomic experience, and I'm certainly ending this flight on a high, landing in New York in the morning. Needless to say, the second Japanese washoku meal was just as incredible as the first, even if the portion wasn't quite as big. And it was the perfect way to wrap up a true gastronomic whirlwind here on ANA First Class. Alright guys, back in my street clothes, 30 minutes outside of New York. Can't let this go to waste. As promised, let's talk about how I actually managed to book this pretty incredible flight that usually costs $20,000 for the one-way journey, but I only paid about $200 out of pocket and the rest was covered by points. Booking ANA First Class is actually one of the best sweet spots for using your points right now, but the key is you have to know which program to book through. The idea is that the Virgin Atlantic Flying Club program charges only 60,000 miles for a one-way flight here on ANA First Class, whereas other programs would charge upwards of 100,000 points for the same flights. So you'll want to use Virgin Miles to book ANA First Class, and that's exactly how I booked, using 60,000 miles for the one-way flight from Tokyo to New York. If you need to earn Virgin Miles, the best way to do so is through the American Express US credit cards, which transfer one-to-one to Virgin Atlantic, and it's really easy to earn those points through credit card welcome bonuses too. So while we're waiting for Japan to reopen their borders, start planning your trip right now and start earning those Virgin Miles so you too can plan a spectacular flight here on ANA New First Class when the time comes to go to Japan once again. Before I knew it, I found myself looking down at the familiar skyline of New York City. With my appetite full and my whiskey glass empty, I reflected on yet another unforgettable first-class flight as we made our landing into New York JFK. And with that, this ANA New First Class flight comes to an end. It has been one of the most enjoyable flights in recent memory. The last time I felt so good landing in New York City was at Singapore Suites, and you can check out that video on screen right now. Tell me which one you liked better, and I'll see you over in that video.